The ribbed piano, a Hollywood mystery. Scarlett Johansson had always been drawn to the spotlight. From red carpets to flashing cameras, her life was scripted to perfection. But beneath the glitz and glamour, something had always felt off. A whisper of a past she couldn't quite remember. And then she found it. A ribbed piano, hidden in the cellar of her upscale Manhattan apartment. It wasn't just old, it was ancient. The wood, cracked and weathered, seemed to hum under her touch. The keys, despite their age, gleamed as if someone had been playing them in secret. At first, she thought it was just a forgotten relic. But then the dreams started. Visions of a dimly lit jazz club, a smoky haze, the soft sound of a piano playing a tune she'd never heard, yet somehow knew by heart, and always a voice calling her name. Scarlett tried to push it from her mind, focusing instead on her picture-perfect life with Ruth Johnson, her ever-admiring boyfriend. But the more she ignored the piano, the louder its mystery grew. One night, after a wild industry rave, something changed. She stumbled home, adrenaline still pumping through her veins, and found herself standing before the piano, unable to resist. She pressed a single key. A hidden compartment clicked open. Inside was an old photograph. A man with striking green eyes, standing in front of a music hall in a town she'd never been to. Or had she? New York. Not the New York she knew, the towering skyscrapers and flashing billboards. This was a different New York. An industrial town with cobblestone streets, flickering street lamps, and secrets buried beneath its surface. And in the corner of the photograph, scrawled in looping handwriting, "Find me, Scarlett." Before they do, her heart pounded. Who was he? And why did she feel like she already knew him? The next morning, she booked a ticket. When she arrived in the old town of New York, she expected answers. What she got instead was Chad Snoscumber, a musician with a disarming grin and a talent for making people forget their troubles. Or, perhaps, making them forget the truth. Their connection was immediate, electric. But something about him didn't add up. The way he avoided certain questions. The way his eyes flickered toward the piano bars lining the streets, as if expecting someone or something to appear. And then there was the hard lip balm, a strange, rare formula he insisted she try, claiming it would help with the cold. But the moment it touched her lips, a wave of memories surged through her mind. Memories that didn't belong to her. Or did they? Scarlett's fingers trembled as she gripped the photograph in her pocket. The town, the piano. Chad, none of this was a coincidence. Someone had left her a trail, and someone else wanted to make sure she never followed it. Scarlett Johansson had faced many things in her career: cutthroat auditions, brutal critics, even the occasional crazy fan. But nothing had prepared her for the eerie, suffocating air of this strange town. New York, the forgotten, industrial version, was nothing like the dazzling skyline she knew. It was quieter, darker, as if the town itself was holding its breath. And at its center was Chad Snoscumber. He had the kind of charm that could talk a person into believing anything. His fingers danced effortlessly over piano keys, weaving melodies that felt almost familiar. Too familiar. Scarlett couldn't shake the feeling that Chad wasn't just some small-town musician. He knew something. But every time she pressed him for details about the piano, about the photograph, she found he would change the subject with a grin, offering her another drink, another distraction. And then there was the lip balm. That damn lip balm. The first time she used it, her world had spun. Images, blurry yet vivid, had flooded her mind: jazz clubs, dim-lit alleyways, a man whispering her name. She had been here before, hadn't she? Scarlett needed answers, and if Chad wasn't going to give them to her, she'd find them herself. A dangerous invitation. That night, she found herself in a smoky, underground bar, the kind of place where secrets were traded more than drinks. The piano in the corner looked just like the one in her cellar, and a familiar melody played softly through the air. Her fingers twitched. She knew that song. Scarlett. She turned sharply. It was Chad. But he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, tall, elegant, wrapped in a silk coat that shimmered under the dim light. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, and her lips painted in the same deep red as the ribbed piano's keys. Scarlett's heart clenched. She knew this woman's name before she even spoke it. Dr. Christiana Zeus. I was wondering when you'd show up, Christiana murmured, a smirk tugging at her lips. Scarlett swallowed, suddenly aware of how tightly she was gripping the photograph in her pocket. You know something, she said, keeping her voice steady, about the piano, about me. Christiana tilted her head. Oh, you know why you found it? Scarlett's mouth went dry. Christiana stepped closer. The mind is a tricky thing. It buries what it can't handle. It erases what it fears. Her gaze flickered toward Chad, who was watching in tense silence. Some people want you to remember. Others, she smiled. Not so much. Scarlett glanced at Chad. A muscle twitched in his jaw. He knew. Why? She demanded, taking a step toward him. Why didn't you tell me? For the first time, Chad didn't have an easy grin to throw her way. His fingers curled into fists at his sides. Because if you remember everything, he hesitated, you might not survive it. Scarlett's pulse pounded. This wasn't just about an old piano. It wasn't just about music or memories. This was bigger. And maybe everyone was hiding the truth. But there was one thing she knew for sure. She wasn't running. Not this time. Scarlett Johansson had always been good at reading people. It came with the job. Every glance, every hesitation, it all meant something. Right now, Chad Snoscumber looked like a man caught between two fires. And Christiana Zeus was the one holding the match. Scarlett's pulse hammered as the underground bar seemed to close in around her. The smoky air thickened. The piano in the corner, identical to the one in her cellar, seemed to be watching. She took a slow breath. I want the truth. No more riddles. Chad and Christiana exchanged a glance. Then, to her surprise, it was Christiana who laughed. Oh, Scarlett, she purred, swirling the drink in her glass. You don't want the truth. You want a version of it that won't ruin you. Scarlett clenched her fists. Try me. Christiana's smile didn't fade, but her eyes sharpened. All right, she said. Let's talk about what happened 12 years ago. Scarlett's heart lurched. 12 years ago. Before Hollywood. Before the fame. A flash of something, music, laughter. A darkened alley pricked at the edges of her mind. I don't remember. Of course, you don't. Christiana cut in smoothly. You were never supposed to. Scarlett turned to Chad, but he was staring at the ground, jaw tight. He knew. Tell me, she demanded. Chad exhaled slowly, then lifted his gaze. His usual cocky charm was gone. 12 years ago, he said, you lived here. Scarlett's breath caught. No, she whispered. I grew up in Los Angeles. Did you? Christiana murmured. The words twisted inside Scarlett's head like a knife. She felt dizzy, as if the ground beneath her was shifting. The ribbed piano, the one in her cellar, the one that had started this whole thing, it wasn't just any piano. It was hers. Memories slammed into her like a train. Rain-soaked streets. A melody played in secret. A promise made and broken. And then a fire. Scarlett staggered back, clutching her head. She could hear it now, the sound of something burning, the smell of smoke, the weight of someone's hand pulling her away. You're remembering, Christiana said softly. Scarlett gasped for air. The truth wasn't just hidden from her. It had been stolen. And someone, maybe Christiana, maybe Chad, maybe someone else entirely, had gone to great lengths to keep it that way. Her fingers curled into fists. No more lies. She turned to Chad, her voice like steel. You either start talking, or I find the truth myself. A long silence. Then Chad looked up. "I'll tell you everything," he said. "But you're not going to like it." Scarlett lifted her chin. "Try me." The underground bar felt suffocating. The weight of Chad's words, the sharp gleam in Christiana's eyes, Scarlett knew there was no turning back. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. 12 years ago. That was the key. "Tell me," she said, her voice steady. Chad hesitated, his fingers tapping against the old wooden table. "You were a musician," he finally admitted. "A damn good one. Before you were an actress. Before Hollywood, you played." Scarlett blinked. "No, that's not. You played this," he interrupted, pointing toward the ribbed piano in the corner. This exact piano. Her pulse hammered. A memory tugged at her. A melody, her fingers dancing over ivory keys. Applause. A name whispered in admiration. Scarlett Johansson. The actress had been someone else first. She had been a musician. And then someone had erased that part of her. Christiana sighed dramatically, swirling the last of her drink. "The moment you started digging, I knew it wouldn't take long." Scarlett turned to her, anger rising. "You knew?" "Of course." Christiana tilted her head, amused. "I was there that night, the night the fire started." The room tilted. Scarlett's breath caught. The fire. 12 years ago. She could see it now. The flickering flames. The panic. The sirens. The way her hands trembled as she pounded on the piano keys, playing until the very last second. But the fire wasn't an accident. Someone had set it. She staggered back. "Who did it?" Chad's face darkened. "You're not gonna like the answer." Scarlett's entire body tensed. She already knew. The answer was in the way Christiana was smirking, in the way Chad couldn't meet her eyes. The answer had been with her all along. Scarlett had set the fire. A sick feeling curled in her stomach. No, that couldn't be right. "I wouldn't." Her voice was barely a whispered. "I wouldn't do that." Christiana raised a brow. "Wouldn't you?" "Because I remember a girl standing at that piano, playing her last note with a wicked grin. You set it on fire and walked away, Scarlett. And then, the next morning she clapped her hands together. Poof. You disappeared." Scarlett's legs threatened to give out. She had burned down her own past, her own music, her own identity, her whole life, before Hollywood. She shook her head. "That's not." Chad grabbed her hand. "You did it because they were going to take it from you," he said, his voice urgent. "Your music, your name, everything. You didn't have a choice." The pieces clicked. The contracts, the producers, the men in expensive suits who had promised her fame in exchange for her music. They were going to own her. So she had chosen to destroy it instead. Scarlett sucked in a sharp breath. Christiana leaned back, clearly satisfied. "So, now that you know the truth," she purred, "what are you going to do with it?" Scarlett felt it, the weight of her past, pressing against her chest. The fire, the music, the deal she had made. She had spent 12 years running from the truth. Now it was time to face it. She turned to Chad, determination burning in her veins. "Take me to the piano." He hesitated. Then, with a slow nod, he led her through a hidden door at the back of the bar. Inside, there it was, the ribbed piano. Scarlett sat down, fingers hovering over the keys. The moment she touched them, a shiver ran through her. She remembered everything. Then, softly, hesitantly, she played. A melody she hadn't touched in over a decade filled the room, a song from a life she had buried. And with each note, Scarlett Johansson, not the actress, but the musician she had once been, came back to life. Christiana smirked. Chad watched in quiet awe. Scarlett? She just smiled, because for the first time in 12 years, she was finally free. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe for more thrilling stories. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.